What's interesting from my point of view is that the Liberal landslide coincided with the rise of a new kind of newspaper, the Express, the Mirror, the Sketch, and they were changing the way politics was reported. They'd realised the power of the photograph, and they'd exploited new printing techniques to splash photographs all over their front pages. It made the newspapers more popular, more accessible. Readership doubled in just 10 years. And so for the first time, you got these photographers hanging around the corridors of power, of Parliament, Whitehall, Downing Street, the so-called press pack, some working for agencies, some directly for individual papers, capturing the personalities behind the issues, politics with a human face.
David Lloyd George, Britain's Prime Minister in the First World War, and Winston Churchill, Prime Minister in the Second, were both leading lights in the new Liberal administration. Lloyd George as Chancellor, Churchill as Chairman of the Board of Trade. From 1906 to 1911, they worked together to draw up a series of welfare reforms, using the government to support people in need in completely new ways. Some have called their reforms the beginning of the welfare state. For children, there would be free schooling to the age of 12, free school meals, medical inspections. For workers, there was a whole package of measures: sick pay, healthcare, unemployment benefit, at least in some trades. Perhaps most importantly, from 1908, a state pension was introduced for all those over 70, sparing the old from the indignity of the soup kitchens. As Lloyd George explained,
"Help for the aged and deserving poor. It is time it was done. It is a shame that a country like ours, probably the richest in the world, should allow those who have toiled all their days to end in poverty and starvation. These are problems the state has neglected for too long."
what was it that motivated the Liberal reformers? To a great extent, it was just social concern. Poverty was a scandal. It begged a humanitarian response. But that wasn't the whole story. The truth was, the Edwardian ruling elite, conservatives and liberals alike, saw in poverty a threat to their own interests. They asked, if children were undernourished, where would the next generation of soldiers come from, fit to defend the empire? They asked, if workers were unhealthy, how could Britain remain productive? And the ruling elite feared the anger of a hungry working class. They feared tension as a threat to the social order. In the latter years of the Edwardian period, those tensions were to grow ever more painfully obvious.
This is part of the Great Western Colliery near Tonypandy in South Wales, the scene of the coal miners' strike of 1910. The strike was covered in a series of images taken by photographers of the Topical Press Agency. They were based in London, but they had photographers all around the country, taking pictures, sending the negs back to head office in Fleet Street, where they were developed and captioned and sold to the newspapers. What they recorded in Tonypandy was a town under siege. The strikers had raked out the boiler fires, they'd shut the machinery down. All except here at the Glamorgan Colliery, where over 100 policemen were defending the pump house. The bosses had brought in blackleg labour, workers from outside to keep the machinery going. Over the next 2 days, angry strikers charged the pump house building, throwing stones and ripping down fences. Eventually they were driven back to the high street, where windows were smashed and shops looted.
For a quarter of a mile, practically every shop had its front smashed in. The street was littered with goods of all descriptions: drapery, groceries, provisions. The rioters ran around unmolested with armfuls of loot.
Eventually, on the orders of Winston Churchill, they called in the army. The town became a virtual war zone. It's hardly a picture of the Edwardian Golden Age.
In 1907, across Britain, 2 million working days were lost through strike action. By 1912, that figure had risen to 40 million. In the hot summer of 1912, one major dispute followed another. The seamen, the dockers, the railwaymen, all caught on camera by photographers of the topical press. What the establishment feared was that this wave of unrest had a political agenda, that British workers were questioning the right of a wealthy elite to own the means of production. Much was made of a pamphlet published by a group of miners in South Wales, entitled The Miners' Next Step. It called for workers across the country to fight, to organise, to take control of every industry.
The working class, if it is to fight effectively, must not be a mob, but an army. We must be regimented and brigaded, all workers together in one national and international union to fight all the capitalist parties.
The truth was, most strikers weren't planning to overturn the social order. They just wanted their wages to keep step with rising prices, and they looked to the unions and to the newly created Labour Party to represent their interests. But the forces of tradition were stacked against them. The Labour Party was still a new force. It had just 29 seats in Parliament in 1906, and the two main parties, the Liberals and the Conservatives, defended the interests of the middle class and the rich. Britain, though proud of its parliamentary democracy, had clearly some way to go before it could be called truly democratic.